Welcome to another episode of Geekoutdoors.com. And being outdoors, it's wonderful to breathe in the fresh air. But here in the US, it is a luxury that most countries don't have. Here's a case in point. Now, as you saw from that image, that is a real image. That is actually from Beijing, China. And just the other day, China had its very first red alert in Beijing for smog pollution. Now, for anybody who keeps up with world news, this isn't something new. The northeastern regions of China, specifically where Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and even the island of Hong Kong, their pollution is really, really bad. To the point where they have to have these smog alerts. I'm not a scientist, but just let me give you some numbers to kind of display to you how bad it really is. And so the air quality is measured by this thing called microns. And so the one in Beijing, it's measured by a PM of 2.5, and PM means particle matter. So it's actually measured by the size, which is microns, and the particles are actually smaller than the human hair. And it's also measured by another thing called micrograms, which I'm pretty sure is like the weight and density of the particles. Now, the measurement for the one in Beijing, the micrograms is actually at 295. And just to give you some reference, the World Health Organization, or WHO, says that the maximum level of safety for micrograms is actually 25 micrograms. So at 295, that's like more than 10 times what the safety limit is. And actually in Beijing, it's been as high as 40 times over the safety levels. So going back to the size of the particles, they're so small that when you breathe it in, it can get stuck in your lungs and also even into your bloodstream. And so what that eventually do is it'll cause health problems and eventual death. And as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, about 4,000 people in Beijing die daily from pollution-related illnesses. And about 17% of the population every year die from pollution-related illnesses. And so this is about 1.6 million of their population, and that's just in Beijing, die every year from this. And so, this brings me to the whole issue of, not just the air quality, but also pollution in general, sustainability. Because a lot of these countries, even though Beijing is very developed, like Hong Kong, the rest of the China is very rural. But whenever you ever have like fast explosions and you don't have the infrastructure to handle it, then you run into problems like this. And the sad thing is, a lot of this huge explosion for decades has been a result of us, the Western consumers. Just think about the fact that you're waiting in line for an iPhone. Well, guess where that's made? And a lot of Western companies, most of their investments are in other countries. And so to meet this demand, a lot of these factories had to be built really quickly with very low health standards and safety regulations. Another example is about a month ago in Bangalore, India, which is basically the Silicon Valley of India. Their pollution near their lake is so bad that they actually have something called toxic foam. And I'm going to put an image up there somewhere. And so these are actually bubble foams, like soap foams, like you would get out of your washer. Might look cool and everything, but when it's toxic, when it gets in your skin, it burns. And so this is just a few examples of what's going on. Now, in terms of what can we do about this? I think every country, every nation, they are aware of this. And so some of the solutions that most people are aware of, like green alternatives, such as like wind energy or solar panels, those are the two that come to mind. But what people don't think about is that the cost of actually getting this done. The most powerful wind farm region in the whole world is actually right here in the US, in the Midwest, in Texas, over the Odessa, Midland, Permian areas. We have the largest wind farms in the whole world. But even that's not going to supply enough power, and they take up a lot of space, and they're, like I said, they're extremely expensive. The same thing goes for solar panels. And so, what our future with energy sources is going to be a combination of things. And one of the most interesting renewable energy sources that I've seen is actually with algae. There's this algae that actually eats human waste, and it converts into like methane. Their waste, they excrete out actual methane gas, which you can use to produce energy. And there's also very powerful microbes that eat things like oil, and they produce, like I said, like gases that you can use to produce energy. And so I think that's where we're heading, and we actually have to head that way because as the population keeps growing, I think we're near like over 6 billion worldwide population. There's not going to be enough resources, and there's not going to be enough land to take care of this. And especially, like I said, going back to the infrastructure, simple things like having a proper sewage and waste management system, having a system where you could actually pick up trash, having clean water, having a sustainable working power grid. Those are things that developed countries like the US, we don't even think about. But if you've ever traveled to like second or third world countries where there's trash piling up, like even in places like Jamaica, if you're going to Kingston, Jamaica, their power grids go off randomly. So things like that, that's a real problem. And hopefully these alternative energy sources and smarter ways of doing things will come about a lot quicker. And if you remember this movie, it was called Soylent Green. They had an overpopulation and had a really, really interesting way of taking care of that. So if you haven't seen that movie, definitely go check it out. It'll open your eyes. And so, that's what I had to talk about today, clean air or the lack thereof in some countries. And so, we're very, very fortunate to have that here. So if you had any ideas or comments, be sure to leave them below. And as always, if you like these videos, subscribe. And for full Ren episodes, head out to geekoutdoors.com. And I will see you outdoors on the very next episode.